Welcome back. It's been 8 days since the day we brewed. Excuse me if my voice is a little bit hoarse. I meant to do the steps you're about to see on the 7th day, but I've been extremely sick. So let's take a look at our fermenters here. They've been sitting in the water bath for the last week, maintaining the proper fermentation temperature of 68 degrees. And we're getting ready today to move these to the second fermenter. Okay, so you can see the airlocks have quit bubbling. This carboy had a higher volume in it. If you recall, I wound up with a little less than I wanted for this batch. So the krausening on this one got high enough to actually coat the glass. It's not still sitting this high, but it got that high and allowed the krausening from the yeast to stick to the glass. This one had a good krausening also and has gone back down. So we're going to go ahead and rack those. I'll come back to you in a minute when I have the first carboy for racking up on the stand, and the one below it that I'm going to move it into. Welcome back. As you can see, I've got my first fermenter up on the rack and ready for transfer. Just grabbed my racking cane out of my sanitizing solution and I'm all set to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the airlock off here. Go ahead and insert my siphon carefully. Don't want to disturb the tube at the bottom here. Get it set down there very carefully. Okay, now this hose, of course, goes down to our next fermenter. It's already been cleaned and sanitized, sitting here waiting for us. Here we go. Simple push starts the flow. I like to pinch it off here to make sure there are no air bubbles in the hose. Now this is the airlock for the new fermenter. We're not ready to put that on yet, so I'm just going to sit it up on my fridge here. And as you can see, things are starting to transfer very slowly into our second fermenter, so we'll let that slowly fill up from the first. I'd like to only fill this one to about the 4.5 rather than 5 gallon mark like last time, to try and even out what I have in the next two fermenters, since we're a little uneven on the first time through. So I'm going to go ahead and let this rack. I'm going to need to do the same to the second. So there's not a whole lot more to see here. We're really just sending the beer through the hose from one fermenter to the other. Nothing terribly exciting. Now you can see the layer of yeast at the bottom of the first fermenter. That's known as trub, T-R-U-B, for those who aren't familiar with the term. Now if you have the means, you can save that and use it as yeast to pitch into your next batch. It's possible to reuse trub for a few batches before you don't want to really do that anymore, before kind of washing it, or starting with a new yeast. I don't know if I'm going to be doing that this time. I still need to decide what my next batch is going to be, so I may or may not save this trub today. But that's basically the racking process. As I said, it's fairly simple. You're really just moving the beer, siphoning it from one container to another. Now once that's done, I'll come back because I'm going to show you I'm going to be dry hopping this batch, and for that I'll be shoving some hops into the carboy neck through a funnel that I've sanitized. So I'll be coming back with you when I'm ready to do that. For today's batch, we're going to be doing something called dry hopping. Now, dry hopping involves adding hops to the brew after the fermentation, or during the fermentation. In this case, we're adding the secondary fermenter. Now, there's two ways you can go in dry hopping. An easy way when you have a carboy like this, of course, is to use pellet hops like this. So I'll use some of the pellet hops in one of the fermenters here. Just go ahead and pour those in. As you can see, that was pretty simple. So dry hopping with pellet hops is a fairly simple task. Those will go ahead and break up in there and give us a nice dry hop. I don't always use pellet hops in my particular system because I don't necessarily have a great way of filtering them out. I often find I have to do a third fermentation tank to really get them off the hops before I'm ready to either keg or bottle. Now, another way to do hops, which is a little more difficult, but it's actually my preferred method, is to use whole leaf hops. Now, when using a carboy, of course, they're a little more difficult to get in through the neck of the carboy. So I use this big funnel here, and I have a sanitized bottling cane. What I do is I just put a few hops at a time through the funnel here, a few pieces at a time, and then go ahead and shove them into the fermenter using the racking cane. It's a little more time consuming, but as I said, I prefer using whole hops for this because I believe they do a better job of dry hopping your beer than pellet hops do. Pellet hops are fine for bittering, but whole hops have always been my preference for dry hopping. I went ahead and used some pellets in the first fermenter you saw there because the homebrew's ply shop I went to is running low on the kind of hops I need for dry hopping this batch, so I went ahead and decided to pellet dry hop half of it. I'm going to do the rest here with these hops and give the beer really a nice aroma. I'm considering also for this batch, although it was not originally in my recipe plan, adding even another dry hop to the actual keg once I go ahead and keg this beer. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. I'm sure you don't need to see this entire process, but I wanted you to see what dry hopping was all about. I'll come back with you in about a week from this time when some of this beer should be ready to keg. I may come back a little earlier than that, earlier this week, to get the beer off the hops before I go ahead and keg it. As I said, I wouldn't worry so much about the carboy I'm doing right now with that, is the one for which I use pellet hops. So I'll be back with you when it's time to do that. Until then, keep on brewing. We'll see you next time.